Hello. In this video, I will do some ACT math problems regarding algebra. So this is just one video. There's going to be multiple videos just on this section on ACT math algebra. So yeah. So okay. So let's begin. One second. Hold on. I'm plugging my writing tablet, my XP pen. Okay. So after completing this chapter, you will be able to add, subtract, multiply, and factor polynomials. Oops. Hold on. Sorry, I'm using my cursor, not my mouse. There we go. Ah, I'm so sorry. I'm okay. So yes. Well, we're yes. So after completing this chapter, you'll be able to add, subtract, multiply, and factor polynomials, isolate a variable, calculate the slope or midpoint of a given 2 points. Write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. Solve an inequality for a range of values. Identify the graph of an inequality. Determine the inequality given a graph. Identify solutions to quadratic equation and solve system of equations. And translate word problems into equations and or inequalities. And yeah, so that's all for this section. Okay, so let's start with question one. Um, so question one says, oops, says, what is the slope of the line given by the equation negative 12x minus 12y 2y equals 14? Okay, so you do have multiple choice. So how do you find the slope? They're not giving you coordinates, right? They are giving you an equation in I think in standard form. So what we got to do is convert it to slope it slope intercept form, or basically we got to convert this into y equals mx plus b, and then whatever the number in front of x is your slope. So basically what we got to do is get y by itself. So the first thing I would do is I would add 12x to both sides. Okay, so this cancels. And so now on the left, you're left with negative 2y equals to 12x plus 14. The next thing I would do to solve for y is get rid of this negative 2 by dividing both sides by negative 2. So you get y equals 12 divided by negative 2 is negative 6x. 14 divided by negative 2 is negative 7. Okay, so what is the slope now? My slope is the number in front of x. So my slope is going to be negative 6. So it's going to be letter B. So yes, the ACT is multiple choice, and you are allowed to use a Desmo calculator. Okay, let's continue on. Okay, now I use my, okay. Question two says question two is a word problem. Um, at a certain toy store, tiny stuffed zebras cost $3 and giant stuffed zebras cost $14. So you have tiny stuffed zebras and giant stuffed zebras. And the store doesn't sell any other size of stuffed zebras. So if the store sold 29 stuffed zebras and made a total of 208 dollars in revenue in 1 week, how many stuffed zebras were sold? Sorry, it should say how many tiny stuffed zebras were sold. So we have tiny zebras and we have giant zebras. So did you know, it is a multiple choice, but did you know, uh, this is a system of equation word problem. So here I'll read the problem again. So at a certain toy store, tiny stuffed zebras cost $3 and giant stuffed zebras cost $14. The store doesn't sell any other size of stuffed zebras. If the store sold 29 stuffed zebras and made it 208 in revenue in 1 week, how many tiny stuffed zebras were sold? So it's system of word equation. So the first thing I would do for system of word equation is label your variables. So we are dealing with tiny and giant. So maybe we could say T for tiny, right? Or you could do X, it doesn't matter. And then you can also do for the giant, you could say G for giant. Okay, that's the first part. Label your variables. The second part is the difficult part, creating two linear equations from the information they give us. So we have to be kind of careful. Yeah, we have to be careful. So if you get yeah, so it says that if you look at the sentence, if the store sold 29 stuffed zebras and made $208 in revenue in 1 week, how many? Okay, so we know that it costs $3 for tiny ones, right? So it costs $3 for tiny, and it costs $14 for giant. So we could say T plus G. And what do you think I should equal that to? Should I equal that to 29 or to 8? Yes, we should set it up to 29 because this is the total amount, not the total revenue, right? So the total amount between tiny and giant zebras were 29 in total. Okay. Now the second equation, how should we create our second equation? So uh we said that it costs $3 for tiny, so we could say 3T plus $14 for giant, so we could say 14G. And then we could set that to the total revenue, which was 208. Okay, so that is a little bit tricky. You just need more practice. If you need a little bit more help or more practice, or if you want a little bit of practice, you check out my supplementary videos on system of equation. Okay, so we created our two system of equation. Now the third part is trying to figure out what do we need. What are they asking? How many tiny? So I believe we have to solve for t, right? So how do we solve? We're going to do, how are we going to solve this? We're going to do elimination. So if I want to solve for t, I would have to maybe get rid of the g's. right? So how we're going to do this is we're going to multiply, let's call this the first equation and then this one the second, right? And then I'll put a little straight line like that. So if I want to get rid of the g's, you have 1g here and 14g. What you got to do is come up with a common denominator. So I believe it's going to be 14g. And then all you got to do is make one positive and one negative, right? So we have a 1g here and you have a 14g on the bottom. So I'm going to leave that 14g on the bottom the same. And I'm going to make this 1g into a negative 14g. Because when you add them up vertically, it zeroes out, which is what we want. Okay, so I'm going to make this 1g into a negative 14g. So what did I have to multiply that to get negative 14g? Yes, that's right, negative 14. Okay. Okay, so let's FOIL that out. So it's going to be negative 14. Negative 14 times g is negative 14g. And then negative 14 times 29. Hold on. You are allowed to use a calculator. Let me get my calculator. Okay, I'm back. So what is 29 times negative 14 is negative 406. And then on the bottom, it's going to be 3t plus 14g equals 208. Okay, horizontal line. Add them up vertically, negative 14 plus 14g cancels. Negative 14 plus 3 is negative 11t. And then negative 406 plus 208 is negative 198. And then solve for t by dividing both sides by negative 11. So I get t equals to negative, whoops, did I make a mistake? Negative 406 plus 208 is not negative 196, it's negative 198. Okay, so negative 198 divided by negative 11 is 18. Okay, so it looks like it's letter J. Now the other option is you could put this in Desmo, right? And then Tiny's would be like our X. If you want to really save some time, yes, you can put that in Desmo and you would look at the point of intersection because these are two linear lines that intersect at one point, right? And then just look at the point of intersection coordinate and you would look at the X coordinate. Okay. I don't think you could just put T and G in the Desmos and it wouldn't work. So I think you have to use X and Y and then yeah, and then figure out what is the X coordinate of the point of intersection. Okay, the other option is you could have also get rid of the t's first, which is perfectly fine by you can get rid of the t by multiplying the first equation by negative 3t, and then you will have a t value, you will have a g value, right? If you get rid of the t's, you will have a g value, and then you're going to substitute that g value into the t. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's move on. Question 3. So question 3 says, which of the following expression is equivalent to 2/3 a times 12a minus 6b minus 6a plus 9b? Okay, so I just realized something different, new. You do have to FOIL out this 2/3 A. You can put the A on the center or on the top. So I just realized there. Okay, so what I did was I just immediately FOILed the 2/3 A. That is, I wish I didn't do that. Uh, what you could have done is made your life easier. Ma- what you could have also done is before you FOIL out the 2/3 A, simplify the inner parentheses. So what I mean simplify basically mean collect like terms. So in this inner parentheses in this parentheses right here, is there anything you can collect? Yeah, I just realized this. Yeah, I could collect the A's. You have a 12A and a 6A. What's 12A and a negative 6A? 6A. And then you can also collect the negative 6B and the 9B. What is 9B and negative 6B? 3B. And then you have this 2/3 A. Okay. Now you may FOIL it out. FOIL out this 2/3. So what is 2/3 A times 6? So if you really want to be, if you're completely lost how to multiply fractions, it's like 2/3, and then you could put the A on the top or center, it's up to you, times it by 6A or 6A over 1. So on the numerator, you're multiplying 2A and 6A, so you're multiplying the constant and the letter. So what's 2A? What's 2 times 6? 12. And then you have this, what's A times A? Well, because they're multiplying with the same base, you add the power. So this is like 1 and 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. And then on the bottom, 3 times 1 is 3. Oops. It should be 12A squared, right? And then you can simplify this. What's 12 divided by 3? It is 4A squared. Okay, do the same thing with the 3B. So if you want to write it out, that's perfectly fine. 2/3 A times by 3B, or 3B over 1. So what's 2A times 3B? So multiply the constant and the letter. That would be 6AB. And then on the bottom, what's 3 times 1? 3. So you would simplify that. What's 6 divided by 3? 2AB. Yeah. So my mistake when I first did this one, I foiled out the 2/3 A immediately. You shouldn't do that because it's just more work and more confusing and it's easy to make mistakes. So instead, you should just clean up the parentheses, then foil out. So that would be letter D. Okay, let's move on to question 4. So question 4 says, what is the midpoint of a line segment with endpoints of 4, -4, and -2, comma 6? So they give you two coordinates and somehow we have to come up with the midpoint. So it's pretty simple to find the midpoint. It's basically you take the average of the x and y's. So a midpoint is a coordinate and you just take the average of the x and y. So it's going to be x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2, like that. And then I'm going to just label these coordinates very carefully so I don't get confused. So this 4 is your x1, this -4 is your y1, this -2 is your x2, this 6 is your y2. Okay, so I don't get confused. So what's x1 plus x2? So x1 is 4, plus my x2 is -2 over 2. And then do the y's, add up all the y's, so it's -4 plus 6 all over 2. And then clean this up. 4 minus 2 is 2, and then 2 over 2 is 1. And then the same thing here, -4 plus 6, that's 2 over 2, which is 1. So it is definitely H. Okay, not too bad. Okay, number 5 is a word problem. So Brandy has a collection of comic books. If she adds 15 to the number of comic books in her collection and multiplies the sum by 3, the result will be 65 less than 4 times the number of comic books in her collection. How many comic books are in her collection? Okay, so this is kind of like the system of equation, but the thing is we're not going to create two system of equation. We're going to create one equation and then we got to solve for C. So just like the just like the system of equation, we got to first label our variables. So we are dealing with comic books and nothing else, right? So maybe we could say C for comic books. Okay. And then that the difficult part is try to come up with an equation. I know it is strange. But you just got to do it. Okay. So Brandy has a collection of comic books. If she adds 15 to the number of comic books, so stop right there. If she adds 15 to the number of comic books, how can I write that as an equation? So our C stands for comic book, so we can say C plus 15, right? If she adds 15 to the number of comic books in her collection and multiplies by the sum of 3, so basically we're multiplying this entire C and 15 by 3, right? The result, what does that mean? It means equal will be 65 less than 4 times the number of her comic books. So how do I write that as an equation? Will be 65 less than 4 times the number of comic books in her collection. So it's 65 less means minus 65. Yeah, minus 65, and then 4 times the number of comic books, so that's 4C. So that would be 4C minus 65. Okay, then what we got to do next is we did the hard part. Now we got to solve for C, right? Okay, so go ahead and solve for C. So maybe on the left side I would FOIL out this 3. So this is going to be 3C plus, and then what's 3 times 15? 45. And then on the right you have 4C minus 65. Okay, so now what we're going to do is solve for C. So what can I do? I should get all the C's on one side. So maybe I could so move this 3C to the right. You could also move the 4C to the left. That's perfectly fine. So this cancels and you're left with 45 equals, what's 4C minus 3C? 1C. And then you have a negative 65. And then what I'm going to do is add 65 to both sides. So I get C equals to, what's 45 plus 65? 110. Okay, so how many comic books are in our collection? A total of 110. So that would be letter D. Okay, so that was that one. Let's move on. So question 6 says, which of the following graphs represents a solution set for 5x minus 10y is greater than 6? So they do on the, it did have some options, but I didn't draw it. So to solve this, you could just, there's two ways you could do this. You can literally put this in Desmos and uh, it's exactly what it is. Just put in Desmo and pick the one that's the best representation of Desmos, right? So if you want to know how to do this by hand, that's perfectly fine. But on the real exam, if you have cross a problem like this, just put in Desmo. You have a time limit. So okay, but I'm going to show you how to solve this by hand. So okay, so first I look at my inequality. So it's kind of like it is a linear line, but it's kind of like it's an inequality linear line. So what you look at What I do is look at the symbol. It says it's greater than, so that means it's going to be a dash. If it was greater than equal to or less than equal to, it's going to be a complete solid, right? Okay, so we know it's going to be dash. And then what I'm going to do is write it as an equation for right now. Okay, so I just made that greater than into an equal sign. Okay, then what I'm going to do is how I'm going to solve this linear line. Well, there's two ways. You can solve it by solving for y and doing the rise over run method, or you can find 2 points, such as the x-intercept and the y-intercept, plot those 2 points, and then do the shading. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna find the x-intercept and the y-intercept because I'm really in a rush. Like, so how do you find the x-intercept for any graph? All you gotta do is set y to 0 and solve for x. Okay, so set y to 0, so it's gonna be 5x minus 10, replace y with 0 equals to 6. So this zeroes out, and now you're left with 5x equals 6. And then divide this by 5, divide this by 5, and you get x equals 6/5, which is 1.2. Okay, so if you want to write this as a coordinate, that's fine. It would be 1.2 comma 0. Okay, now then what we're going to do is find the y-intercept. So how do you find the y-intercept for any graph? It's like the opposite, set x to 0 and solve for y. That's it. So go back here. So set 0 for x. So it's going to be 5 times 0 minus 10y equals to 6. This zeroes out. So you're left with negative 10y equals 6. Divide this by negative 10. And you get 6 divided by negative 10 is negative 0.6. If you want to write it as a coordinate, it would be expressed as 0 comma negative 0.6, right? Okay, so now we know our 2 points are 1.20 and 0 comma negative 0.6. Okay, and we also know it's dash, so you can start graphing. Is this how you would graph it? Mhm. Okay, so 1.2, here's 2, so here's 1. 1.2 would be like around here somewhere. 0 comma negative 6.6, this is negative 1. It would be like about here. And then connect these two dots with a dash line because it is a dash, like that. Okay, and then what you're gonna do is you do the shading. So the shading is a bit strange for some people. So what I do is pick a point that the line does not go through. So I always like to pick 0, 0, unless it goes through the origin 0, 0. And it does not. It's really close, but it doesn't go through the center, right? So Okay, so I'm going to use that point and then put it back into your inequality, not the equation. So what I mean is put it back here. 5x minus 10y is greater than 6. So, and then you just replace x with 0, replace y with 0. This zeroes out, so you're left with 0 is greater than 6. And then you got to ask yourself, is that a true or false statement? So if you want to put it on the number line, that's fine. 6 is on the bigger number, 0 is the smaller. Ask yourself, is 0 greater than 6? Not according to this, right? This is false. So what we said it was false. What you're going to do is shade. So we said we're going to pick 0, 0. Since it's false, you're going to shade on the other side. So you're going to shade right here, right? Now, if it were true, you're going to shade above the point 0, 0 because that is true, right? So this is your graph. If you wanted to do by hand, you could have just easily put this in Desmo. I would have put it in Desmos because you do have a time limit. Okay, let's move on. Okay, question 7. So question 7 says, what is the solution for x in the system equation below? So two options you could have done. You could have just put this easily in Desmo, 3x plus 4y equals 31, 3x minus 4y equals -1, and then figure out the point of intersection where they both meet and just look at the x coordinate. Okay. Now the other way is you could have solved this using elimination method. So I'm going to show you if you're interested. So here's equation 1, here's equation 2. So I see that one of the letters cancels immediately. There's nothing you have to multiply, right? Unlike the other one, you had to multiply by equation 1 by a scalar. The y's cancels immediately if you add them up vertically. So go ahead and add them up vertically. So what's 3x plus 3x? 6x. What's 4y negative 4y? Cancels. What's 31 minus 1? 30. And then solve for x divides by dividing both sides by 6. So you get 30 over 6, which is 5. Okay, so that is why it's B. Good? Perfect. Okay, so let's move on to question 8. Okay, question 8 says, which of the following are solutions to the quadratic equation, parentheses x plus 1 square equals 1 over 25? So when they say solution, they mean the x-intercept. So all we got to do for this one is solve for x. So we have x plus 2, x plus 1 squared equals 1 over 25. And then the first thing I would do to solve for x is get rid of this power 2. To do so, I'm going to square root both sides. Okay, so on the left, the 2 disappears. You're left with x plus 1. And then on the right, be careful. Remember, when you take the square root, you do get a positive and a negative root. So you do plus or minus, and then it's a square root of, so you can rewrite this as square root of 1 over square root of 25. Okay, you're square rooting both terms. Now, luckily, they're all perfect squares. So what is the square root of 1? 1. What is the square root of 25? 5. They're all perfect. And then we have two roots, so it's going to be a positive 1/5 and a negative 1/5. Okay, then what we're going to do is solve for x by subtracting 1 from both sides. So remember, we have two solutions. We have positive and a negative. So one of my solution would be positive 1/5 minus 1. And then the other solution would be negative 1/5 minus 1. Okay, go ahead and clean this up more. What's 1/5 minus 1, or 5 over 5? Right? 1 is the same thing as 5 over 5. So what's 1 minus 5? Negative 4/5. And then over here, what's negative 1/5 minus 1, or negative 5 over 5? That would be negative 6/5. Okay, so as you can see, it's going to be option H. X is negative 6/5 and negative, whoops. It's actually, this should be a 4, my bad. Wait. Yeah, sorry, this is a typo. This should be x equals negative 4/5. So that is letter H. Okay, so yeah, two more to go. Question 9. Which of the following inequalities is equivalent to negative 2 minus 4x is less than equal to negative 6x? So you just got to solve for x, and the first thing I would do is before I move things around, make sure if you can collect like terms on both sides. So before you move things around, on the left side, negative 2 and negative 4x, is there anything you can collect? No, this is a constant, this is a variable, so we can't combine. What about the right? You're just left with negative 6. Okay, so the first thing I would do is if I'm going to move that 2 to the right by adding 2 to both sides. So I get negative 4x is less than equal to negative 6x plus 2. And then what I'm going to do is get all the x's on one side. So I'm going to add 6x, 6x. So this cancels. What's negative 4 and 6x? Positive 2x is less than equal to 2. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And you get x is less than equal to 1. Now, you don't flip the sign because you only flip it when you divide or multiply by negative. Okay, so that looks like, you don't see it, but it's letter E. Let me scroll down. Yeah, letter E. Okay, last one. Here we have an absolute value question. It says which values of x satisfies the equation 5 absolute value of 2x minus 6 absolute value plus 3 equals to 13. So to solve for absolute value, you're going to have to create two equations, but before you create your two equations, there's a few things you got to do. You got to make sure there's nothing near the absolute value. So we got to get rid of this 5 and we got to get rid of this 3. Okay. Then what you got to do is once you have nothing near the absolute value, you got to make sure this is positive. If it's a negative, for example, if it when you got rid of the 5 and 3, and if you had like absolute value of 2x minus 6 equals to, let's pretend it was negative 2. So if this number is negative, you would say this is no longer no solution. Okay, so let's figure out if we have a no solution. So first thing I would do to get the absolute value alone is subtract this 3 from both sides. Do not divide 5 yet. So you have 5 absolute value of 2x minus 6 equals to 13 minus 3 is 10. And then what I'm going to do is get rid of this 5. Now, this is multiplying, so the opposite of multiplying is dividing both sides by 5. So you get the absolute value of 2x minus 6, and then 10 divided by 5 is 2. Okay. The next thing I would do is once I have nothing near the absolute value, I would create my two equations. So the first one is basically this without the absolute value. So it's going to be 2x minus 6 equals 2. And then the other one would be 2x minus 6 equals to negative 2. Okay. And then go ahead and solve for x. So I'm going to add 6. 2 plus 6 is 8. Divide this by 2. You get x equals 4. Same thing here. Add 6. You get 2x equals to 6 minus 2 is 4. Divide this by 2. You get x equals 2. So x equals 2, x equals 4. And what does that give you? I mean, what letter is that? That is, I believe, letter K, 2 and positive 4. Okay, so that was the end of it. So I'm going to stop here.